Hello. Welcome to the recorded lecture on Regina Rini's article on ethics, artificial intelligence, and emerging consciousness. Her article is called Raising Good Robots, and that is what we read for this week. Allow me a couple remarks of introduction. While the Basu article was an example of how we might bring together some aspects of the moral theories we've studied so far to understand some of our modern moral issues, Basu focuses on interhuman relations. Now we'll shift our thinking a little. In Regina Rini's article, Raising Good Robots, she provides us a way of thinking forward about and with these moral theories. In doing so, she points out issues with the theories themselves, as well as some very good reasons to suspect that they won't work for moral artificial intelligence or AI. Briefly, I assume some of you are more aware of these issues than I am, but it is nonetheless worth making explicit why we need to include AI or artificial intelligence in our moral considerations. Frankly, we are technologically at a point where it matters a great deal. AI is already being used to gather data on us, for example, in deciding what ads we see on our social media or on our search engines. It's already AI is already being used to predict a lot of human behavior and to guide a lot of organizational psychology. It's already being used to make self-driving vehicles, and these are aspects of our lives relevant to the moral dimension. We need to make decisions about how to tell AI to deal with situations of life and death, or general considerations of suffering. In these PowerPoint slides, we'll cover what Rini's main question is and why it is a question at all. We'll cover the celestial view of morality, its approach to AI, and why Regina Rini rejects it. And then, additionally, we'll cover the organic view of morality, its approach to AI, and why Rini rejects it. And then finally, we'll look at Rini's proposal for approaching teaching ethics to AI, which she calls the parenting model. So, what's the main question, right? How to teach robots morality, and should we be the ones to do it? That's what Rini's getting at. Our guiding question, or the guiding question she proposes for us, is if a robot can make choices, there is a real question about whether it will make moral choices. But what is moral for a robot? And is this the same as what's moral for a human? She goes on to say, quote, philosophers and computer scientists alike tend to focus on the difficulty of implementing subtle human morality in literal minded machines. But there's another problem, one that really ought to come first. It's the question of whether we ought to try to impose our own morality on intelligent machines at all. In fact, I'd argue that doing so is likely to be counterproductive and even unethical. End quote. This statement by Rini leads to some other questions, namely, how do we instill moral values, moral deliberation, and moral behavior into artificial intelligence? And secondly, are we the ones who should do it? So why is this a question? Rini says, quote, we like to imagine that artificial intelligence will be similar to humans because we are the only advanced intelligence we know. But we are probably wrong. End quote. She uses a lesson from this software called AlphaGo. If you remember from the reading, this is an AI software designed to play the game Go. And I encourage you to, if this doesn't ring a bell, go back to the article and read early on in the article when Rini talks about AlphaGo. What we see is a highly sophisticated artificial intelligence able to play a game and master that game, but unable for us, or I should say, unable to explain to us how this software is able to master the game. So, primarily, one of the main lessons from AlphaGo is that AI develops decision making processes that humans cannot understand. Rini argues that maybe if the AI AlphaGo could explain its strategy to us, we'd be able to understand. In fact, however, there is no reason to assume this would be the case. She says, quote, artificial minds needn't work as ours do to accomplish similar tasks, end quote. And from this example, Rini extrapolates to the general level, posing that perhaps AI machines will, quote, think about everything, not just Go, in ways that are alien to us, end quote. And she goes on to say, quote, imagine that robots show moral concern for humans and robots and most animals, and also sofas. They are very careful not to damage sofas, just as we are careful not to damage babies. We might ask the machines, why are you so worried about sofas? And their explanation might not make sense to us, just as AlphaGo's explanation of Move 37 might not make sense to us, end quote. And just in case you are blanking, remember Move 37 is what they call this move that the AI software AlphaGo was able to make in its demonstration of sort of mastering the game of Go on its own. And Move 37 that's the name that they gave this sort of winning move that we can't explain. So the case of AI presents us with a very old philosophical puzzle about morality. What is its origin and its nature? Rini divides philosophical positions or approaches to morality into two primary philosophical camps. And she's not wrong to do this, to divide moral theories this way, though it is pretty simplistic. In Rini's words, she asks, quote, is it something above and beyond human experience? Something that applies to anyone or anything that could make choices? Or is morality a distinctly human creation, something specially adapted to our particular existence, end quote. First, I'll briefly go over the two approaches to ethics and artificial intelligence that Rini names. Then, in the next few slides, we'll look closer at each approach. The celestial view can be summed up in Rini's words as the view that, quote, morality is somehow out there, beyond mere human nature, eternal and objective, end quote. In this view, programming AI happens according to universal objective moral principles. And some of our philosophers who fall into this camp are Plato, Mill, and also Kant. I am going to be honest and tell you I can't remember why I placed Kant in some parentheses there, so just feel free to laugh at me there. The organic view, on the other hand, can be summed up in Rini's words as the view that, quote, morality is a future of the particular nature of specific moral beings. Human morality is a product of human nature, end quote. And in this view, we approach programming AI according to human moral principles rather than universal objective moral principles.